Usually at part of the Oorah auction, we try and talk about something that's a really hot topic in Klal Yisrael at the time, and that's somewhat related to one of Oorah's programs. For example, for the last couple of years, we had Rabbi Katz, Freddie Friedman come in, Elchonon, to discuss the Shidduch crisis. Now, and because that's related to Oorah's Rebbitzin program, which has a lot to do with Shidduchim. This year, we heard from Rabbi Biederman before, one of the programs that Oorah does is gives out over $2 million a year. That's $200,000 a month for 10 months, $200,000 a month. Sally will tell me if I got the math right on this, but $200,000 a month for 10 months a year. It's over $2 million, over $2 million in tuition for people. And part of the reason for that is because tuition is very expensive. And apparently there are people out there now that want to call it a tuition crisis. So we're going to have some people here and come to address and give us their thoughts on this tuition matter. Anybody who wants to email in some questions to be discussed by the administrators or the Askonim that are going to come in and discuss this can email in their questions at talktuition@oorah.org. Talktuition, TALKTUITION, talktuition@oorah.org. So we're going to be starting with that just very shortly. And I know you work for Agudath Yisrael. What are your thoughts on this issue?
Obviously, this is a huge topic, an emphasis on the word huge, because it really is. It really is a crisis. It's not something which people are exaggerating and saying, oh, there's a crisis. There really is a serious...
And why is that? Why is it a crisis?
The crisis, I want to give you an example, Elchonon. You have some people living not necessarily in the tri-state area who have tuition bills. They're not, even if you look at the tri-state area, Lakewood, which is considered to have a low balling tuition cost, $6,500 a child, and someone has 4 kids in yeshiva, $6,500 times 4, putting you on the spot now.
Oh my God.
It's a lot of money, that's for sure.
That's for sure, that's a lot.
It's a lot of money, it's tens of thousands of dollars. And this is not tax deductible, it's not a write-off, it's money that you have to give from whatever gross you have. And families are struggling. Yeshivas are struggling. Sometimes the yeshivas need so much money. Yes, yeshivas need money because they have to pay salaries. And let's not kid ourselves. The staff of yeshivas, whether it's the Abbayim, the teachers, the administrators, are not making mega salaries. They're not coming home with these, tremendous salaries. You can say maybe we can cut and try to shave off a little bit. Rabbeim are not getting paid enough. Teachers are not getting paid enough. Tuition is too much. So the imbalance is something which has evolved into really what's today called a crisis. Families can't afford it. Yeshivas are struggling to pay the bills. So where do you turn? Turn to the parents, increase tuition, more money? Do you turn to the yeshivas, take away, let's make the salaries lower? So what do? So there really, really is a real crisis. And it's everywhere. It's not just. So
you're not saying that the tuition is too high. You're not saying that the yeshivas are spending too much. You're saying the fact of the matter is just the way it is. Tuitions have to be high, and that's still not enough. As we speak with Rabbi Avi Schnall from Agudath Yisrael, a former Oorah employee here at the Oorahthon 2017,
and the current Oorah volunteer, my greatest pride,
at 1877 auction, 1877 auction. We're talking about tuition, which is related to one of Oorah's programs, where Oorah supplements tuition. For that, and those are your thoughts on the tuition crisis. We're going to have a lot more to talk about with that. If you have any questions, you can email them to talktuition@oorah.org. Now we're going to go back to our esteemed Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss for another burst of inspiration, which will be followed immediately by another Shark Tank. That and lots more coming up on Oorahthon 2017. Thank you so much, Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss. We're actually a slight change in schedule. Instead of going to Shark Tank right now, we're going to continue talking about the tuition crisis that we mentioned. And as Rabbi Schnall laid out so eloquently before about the high cost of tuition, what, if anything, can we do about it? We have 2 wonderful guests online now to discuss this. Rabbi Moshe Bane is the president of the Orthodox Union and is a senior partner at the international law firm of Ropes and Gray, and heads its Department of Corporate Restructuring. Rabbi Bane has lectured and written extensively on issues relating to the American Jewish community and is co-founding editor of the journal Klal Perspectives. He is joined on the line by Rabbi Yeruchim Silber, who has a wealth of experience in Jewish communal work, now as the director of the New York Government Relations of Agudath Yisrael of America. His many years of advocacy and cooperation with local officials and government bodies make him well suited for his efforts on behalf of yeshivas and other community issues. Good Vach, and welcome to Rabbi Bane and Rabbi Silber. Good Vach.
Agudath, Rabbi Bane, Agudath, Rabbi Silber. I'm not sure if I hear you so well, but I'm sure you hear me. I wish the volume by me was a little bit louder so I can hear you clear. Thank you so much. Our producer is working on that right now. Rabbi Yeruchim, we know each other quite well. Rabbi Bane, we've met several times. Obviously, the tuition crisis. This is something which is big. It's something which is affecting everybody. We had a few minutes before to talk a little bit about, very, very briefly, about, is this real or is it not real? I guess maybe we spoke about that different people could have the opportunity to send in questions. And before Shabbos, several lots, actually, of questions were sent in from people that were excited to hear about the fact that finally tuition crisis is being brought to the front lines and giving everyone the opportunity to be able to send in their questions, and maybe my issues could be addressed, or my questions could be talked about online to all of the thousands of listeners and viewers that are listening right now to the Oorahthon. So, Rabbi Bane, I'll ask you first. One of the questions was sent in, which really is a most important question, is that we know there's a crisis, but not necessarily does everyone recognize how far-reaching is this crisis. Is this something which only affects those living in the tri-state area? Is this something which affects those living in California? Other communities that have found some way to deal with it, whether it be the Chassidish communities, other out-of-town small community schools that have found their way to deal with it, that perhaps we could learn from. As a communal crisis, what can you tell us, for all of us listening from across the country, and there really is a viewership tonight, and people listening literally from coast to coast, especially at this hour, from coast to coast, tuning in live, hearing what's going on. Is this affecting everybody? Are there communities that have worked something out that we could learn from? Or no? The answer is this is a crisis, and all of us are suffering from this.
Well, first of all, good luck and shkayach on raising such an important issue that is worthy of wide-ranging communal discussion. I think the question of whether it affects everyone, first of all, as a kehila, as a community, we're all affected if there's anybody who's affected by it. And there certainly is no doubt many, many families who are. On a community-by-community basis, there are different needs in different communities. Some communities have lesser expectations and needs for their children than others, and therefore the kinds of solutions that you were referencing may be more palatable, but wouldn't be appropriate for others. I think everybody's struggling and everybody's trying to address the issue. The issue really differs, however. Even though it's an issue everywhere, it differs by community. For example, in many communities, it's purely an economic shalom bayis type of problem, in which families are struggling, tensions, rage because of it, competition among competing needs are being struggled over, and that's a real serious problem. There are other parts of our community, however, where it's a religious problem, meaning that there are many communities, perhaps of lesser commitment, who are simply taking their children out of day schools and putting them into public schools because of the high cost of tuition. So for those communities, it's not only an economic issue, but from the community leadership perspective, they have to view it as a real deep and very threatening religious challenge. But then we have other kinds of consequences that the tuition problem have created among us. For example, we all know that as parents, one of our primary needs as human beings is to take care of our families and to address their needs, housing, clothing, food. And one of the needs that we are desperate to take care of on behalf of our children is their learning, their Talmud Torah, preparing them for a parnasa. And when we're faced with a tuition structure that simply doesn't allow us as parents to satisfy that need, that creates a tremendous sense of frustration and a question of self-doubt. And that creates a whole other range of consequences other than the financial struggle. And finally, and one of the other parts of the problem that I find very troubling is that it creates a sense of distance between the community and the individual. In very many instances, people feel betrayed by the community, that expectations are imposed. They enter into struggles with their yeshivas about the tuition and the scholarships they might be entitled to. They look around and they see other people who enjoy tremendous luxury while they're struggling to make ends meet, and then imposed on yet more by the yeshivas and day schools to pay tuition, and that creates a sense of alienation. So all of these problems all have to be considered when we talk about what we're calling here a tuition crisis.
Rabbi Bane, thank you so much for clarifying this in such an eloquent way, because it's true, it's not just a tuition crisis. It comes about, and it has its reach to so many different areas, like you said, the shalom bias issue, and the religious needs, and the competing needs, and so on and so forth. It really is much more than just a simple coined one-term phrase, tuition crisis. This is really a communal crisis on so many levels. Rabbi Silber, you've been involved in communal work for a very, very long time. And perhaps, maybe, unfortunately, this communal crisis, maybe now we'll coin it, some people tend to think this is about yeshivas, it's for the administrators, they have to deal with it, they're the ones that have to raise the tuition, and they'll have to figure it out. And me as the regular guy, I pay my tuition, I do my dues, and I'm done. But then again, we're suffering. We have these high tuition bills. We have all these other challenges that Rabbi Bane mentioned. What can you tell our viewers as on a communal level, part of the communal obligation, what could we do? We're not the administrators. We're not the lobbyists. Maybe some of us, most of us, are not the lobbyists sitting in state capitals trying to get some government funding. What could the average person sitting at home, getting every month those tuition bills, figuring out how am I going to pay this, and they ask, what could I do to help? What could we tell those people, the masses, what they could do to help with this tremendous crisis?
Yeah, well, first let me say it is a major communal issue. There's no more important issue, and look, we know there are so many tzedakahs, there are so many important issues, and so many things, but nothing, absolutely nothing, is more important than chinuch, than Jewish education. Look at America. Look at this country 70, 80 years ago when there were barely any yeshivas. How many people, survived? I survived spiritually from those generations. And look at the difference. I just recently heard a story just a few days ago from something that a quip that was made by the Brisker Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael by Rabbi Moshe Bane. He said that he has a lot of American boys come to him, and almost every boy has a story about a grandfather who may have lost a job because he wouldn't work on Shabbos, or a grandmother who had a tear-stained Tillim who would sit and cry over her when she lit the Shabbos candles. And he said, why does every American boy have a story? And the answer is because those are the ones that survived. It's only the grandchildren. They all have stories. Only the grandchildren of those, not only, but primarily the grandchildren of those people, those who were Moshe Nefesh, those who didn't succumb to the temptation, to work on Shabbos, and you knew if you didn't work, you would lose your job. Those grandchildren who are survived, and that was during a time when there were very few yeshivas. Look at the difference over the last 70, 80 years. How the landscape of America has changed with all the founding of yeshivas and day schools. So it is certainly a communal responsibility. There's been many ideas with community-wise, where there's been ideas of people dedicating a portion of their, whether it's 1% or 2% of their stock of money to yeshivas, of communal funds. There's been a lot of talk about that, and government, and government could play a part of it as well. Look, I can say for New York State, which I'm most familiar with, spent $26 billion on education. That's besides the localities. New York State itself spent $26 billion. The non-public school, which the yeshivas are part of, is about 11% of the school population. New York State total gets about, this year we got about $300 million. Well, it's fine, it's wonderful, and we appreciate it, but it's really a drop in the bucket, and there's so much more that can be done over the years. There are voucher programs, there are tax credit programs that can really be done to alleviate this problem of tuition. So, as a community, we need to make sure it's a community on top as a community obligation. We need to get more federations involved to understand the importance of education, and we need to work with government more to see what we can do.
Rabbi Yeruchim, I'll just jump in for a minute here and mention this important point you just brought up about government involvement and government funding. Both you as well as Rabbi Moshe Bane, together with the Orthodox Union, have done tremendous amounts, talking about tens of millions of dollars that have funneled into the yeshivas, whether it be in New York State. I know personally, I'll speak in New Jersey. I have a tremendous covet to work together with Josh Kaplan, newly hired in the Orthodox Union in the New Jersey end, and we've, together with different individuals, Gary Sher and the like, and we have tremendous community leaders, Ralph Zucker and Dovi Gross, and all the other different people that contribute so much on the government end to get as much as we possibly can from the government funding. And how government funding doesn't happen by itself, it only comes about through the grassroots effort. And if people ask, what could I do to contribute to the tuition crisis? It's a simple question back to them. Well, have you called up your senator? Have you called up your assemblyman? Have you done your part to try to get whatever we can from the government? But with all the government funding comes the third question. And yeah, I'm sorry?
Have you registered and have you voted?
Have you exactly, absolutely. A politician, a government official that hears the needs, all they care about is, did you vote? Is the Jewish community that's asking for these vouchers, scholarships, funding, are they a voting community? And that's really what matters. But here's going to come the next question. The next question will be that, so yeshivas are collecting tuition, parents are giving tuition, yeshivas are raising funds, the government is giving so much money, but yet there still seems to be a shortfall. So how do we understand it? How do we figure that? You talk about these big, huge numbers, $100 million cap funding and $100 million mandated services, and now there's STEM funding available. Immunization funds were quadrupled this year due to your efforts, and so on and so forth. But yet yeshivas are still struggling. So how do we comprehend that it's a crisis? Yeshivas need the money, but yet they're charging tuition and they're getting so much from government funding. How do we comprehend this paradox? Perhaps, Mr. Rabbi Bane, you would have some insight on this.
Well, I would suggest that you have to look at it from two perspectives. Number one, there often is raised the argument that yeshivas are just spending too much money and we're providing too many high-end components that we really can't afford. I would argue quite to the contrary. I would argue that we're not spending anywhere near enough money on tuition payments or collections because yeshivas need to do much, much more.
Rabbi Bane, I'll just clarify that one point, just to give you some numbers so people can understand it. In New Jersey, the state spends on a student in New Jersey between local, federal, and state dollars an average of $22,000 a child. $22,000 on average, some locations are more. So even if yeshivas were collecting tuitions from every student at $20,000, they would still be falling short of what a counterpart in public schools are receiving. Just to put that, just to understand how big of a number and how much we're falling short in providing for our students.
And they're spending that kind of money, whether it's $22,000, $24,000, on a secular education alone, while we're trying to not only provide secular educations, but limudei kodesh, which dominate our curricula.
That's right.
And not only that, but we're also facing the hashpah issues, the outside influences that through our yeshivas and the chinuch process, we're trying to immunize our children. That's an enormously intense obligation that we have as yeshivas and day schools. So all of those components require a significant outlay, and I don't think we're actually outlaying enough. So I don't think you could look at the issue that way. But I, with all due respect to our entire discussion, I'm speaking to myself as well, I don't know that it's us askonim who really the question should be posed to. Because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends a challenge like this to a kehillah, to a community, there is more than the pragmatic dimensions to it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is clearly saying to the community, there's something that you have to be doing on a spiritual level, on a religious level. This is a communal-wide problem, and we're not addressing it on a religious basis. So, of course, we should do all the donations and all the askonis and all the lobbying, but we have to look at those efforts as a form of tefillah, a form of prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Look how much we're trying. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to help us. And maybe we're not trying enough. Maybe we're not spending enough time making phone calls to legislators. Maybe we're not spending enough time dealing with grassroots efforts and voting. And maybe we're not donating enough to yeshivas. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, until you start doing your part, how can you turn to me and expect me to relieve this problem? So I think we have to reorient the conversation to some degree to look at all the responsibilities we have, but understand that those responsibilities are not going to be the direct source of the solution. The solution is going to come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we have to make these efforts as our tefillah and our hishtadlus for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give us the relief that we so desperately need.
That is an excellent point and so important for everyone to hear to understand what we need to do, what we need to be doing. That it's not just, to talk about it, it's not just to complain about it, that tuition crisis, communal crisis, however we want to coin this, really needs to be at the forefront. And just to remind all of our viewers, this is the Oorahthon, and this is your last opportunity to be able to donate to the Oorah auction, 1877 auction, 50 prizes, $36,000, up to $50,000, 100 times your donation, shaitos, gift cards, so on and so forth, 50 prizes, 1877 auction, oorahauction.org, oorahauction.org. And we're going to go back to our two guests that are on the line. This really is a fascinating conversation. Again, Rabbi Bane, Rabbi Silber, thank you for volunteering your time and dedicating your time and bringing this important conversation to the forefront. And, Rabbi Bane, you mentioned before that we're not providing enough. But then again, maybe we're providing it to some people might say that it's trips, and then there's science lab, and then there's a computer lab. And when I was in school, I didn't have a science lab. And when I was in school, I didn't have a computer lab. So, Rabbi Yeruchim, maybe you can fill us in a little bit over here and give us some insight. How do we make that balance? How do we make the balance to make the decision to say parents are struggling, the community is struggling, but we want to give our children an education? So do we go ahead and say we're going to cut some of the areas of education? Maybe we shouldn't have a science lab if we can't afford it, and not charge parents the extra $200-300 we have for tuition. I'll give you an example. Some things last year in New Jersey, I'll speak on New Jersey for a moment. Last year in New Jersey, there was a school that hired security guards. They felt that there was so much going on in the country. The parents were nervous, the school was nervous, and they hired security guards. It was a large school. They hired 4 security guards. The cost of the school was a little bit more than $250,000. And I spoke with the school administrator and I said, where are you going to get $250,000 to pay for these security guards? And his answer to me was, I have no choice. I have to hire security guards. How could the yeshiva today, wherever this yeshiva was, in North Jersey, we're exposed, we're on a big highway, people see us, it's a crazy world, it's a dangerous world, things are happening, I have to keep my kids safe. Where am I going to pay for it? I have no idea. I says, but bottom line, what are you going to do? You're going to have to pay the bill to the security guards. Where's the money going to come from? And his answer to me was, he looked me in the face and he says, it's going to go on to the parents. And the parents are going to have to cover it, and we're going to have to raise our tuition. Now, after a long year of a lot of efforts, we were able to pull off, due to the help of many people, a new security funding in New Jersey, that particular school, with the help of legislators, not the help of legislators, but the leadership of the legislators and Askanim, that school received about $100,000. But they were still left with a $125,000 bill. So do we tell this school that we just can't afford it? It's just too much. And are parents going to be willing to say, let's take a little bit away from the education, but stop charging the tuition? How do we make that balance?
Yeah, look, there's no across-the-board answer. And obviously, each school, each yeshiva has to make the decision and determination what works best for them. Science lab maybe is very important, may not be for everybody. Security, I will say in most cases it's not a luxury, it's really a necessity. And if Chas v'Shalom, God forbid, we were to have, Hashem Yishmor, one serious thing with no security, we would never live it down. So obviously that's something that's very important. But listen, we want professional rebbeim, professional teachers. Parents are demanding it. Parents want top-level chinuch for their children. I remember when I was going to yeshiva, we didn't have that. Many rebbeim were people who had they said some with no other talents. Be a rebbe, you can't do anything else. Today, rebbeim are very talented people and people that could probably be successful in many other fields and choose to go into this field, and they're not compensated nearly enough. That's important also. There's been a drive for the last few years there's been a rebbeim fund put together to try to get more money, deservingly so, to our rebbeim. But really, each yeshiva, each school has to make a determination what's best for them to find that balance. There's only so much you could put on parents. There's different communities. Some of the Hasidic communities have more of a kehillah structure, so sometimes less of a burden on parents, because the kehillah itself will feel responsibility for all the yeshivas and all the schools within the realm of that kehillah. But really, it comes down to each school making the determination where they can cut, where they can spend. You don't want to, you know, obviously there's nothing you want to cut. But look, when you have limited budgets and limited needs, you got to find the right balance somewhere and do what's most important for the chinuch.
It's a really hard decision.
Take it from there.
Yeah, it's a really hard decision to make. Obviously, I guess I'm very thankful that I'm not in that position that has to make that decision. But these are all such important topics. This is a priority topic that needs to be discussed that is affecting and needs to be discussed by every community, by every family. And I just want to thank both of the guests, Rabbi Bane, Rabbi Yeruchim Silber, both of you that represent organizations that are doing so much in this area. And someone once asked me, and I think this is so important for us to hear, Rabbi Yeruchim and Rabbi Moshe, that someone asked, how, you brought yeshivas so much money this year, the security funding and this funding, but my tuition bill didn't go down. And my response to them was, exactly, your tuition bill didn't go up either, necessarily. That costs rise, expenses rise.
Small percentage that would have gone up otherwise.
Exactly. They talk about immunization. Immunization is something which yeshivas have to do. It's a cost to yeshiva. And now through your efforts, it's able to be supplemented. You talk about STEM education. It's something which children need, deserve, and have a right to. And now through the OU's efforts, some yeshivas will be able to tap in and have a reimbursement on that. Historic achievements that are really making a tremendous, significant impact in this crisis, but it is not solving the issue, and the conversation needs to continue, and we will continue the conversation in the future. In the next hour, I believe, is going to be.
Yes, we will be continuing this all night long, and hopefully this is the start, of a community-wide discussion. We thank both Rabbi Yeruchim Silber and Rabbi Moshe Bane for coming on and bringing and so eloquently discussing this. If you want to help Oorah and help Oorah's program of supplementing and tuition assistance, you can call now at 1-877-7-AUCTION or oorahauction.org to make a donation.